Welcome to another PureRead audiobook. It's wonderful to have you with us. Before we get started, please like and subscribe to our channel and share it with friends. Supporting us in this simple and easy way ensures we can continue adding more delightful audiobooks for your listening enjoyment. The following story is copyrighted PureRead Limited, the home of books you can trust. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy.
My Love the Hunted, Regency Romance by McColl. Chapter 1. Yearning for Love. Sephora Oswald approached the skittish mare with caution, careful not to startle her. As she drew closer to the animal, she murmured words of endearment. "Look at how beautiful you are," which was really true. Sephora had not seen such a beautiful horse in a long time, and she wondered when she'd been brought to the Duke's stables. When they first arrived, nearly 3 months before, Sephora would go round the stables trying to find a suitable mate for herself. Either the horses were too strong or too docile for her, but she felt as if this one would be just perfect for her. "My beauty, who brought you here?" She moved closer, then stopped, waiting for the horse to settle down, for she was a bit agitated. "I know that you're afraid being away from all that's familiar to you, but I'm here as a friend and not to harm you. Please let me be your friend, and not to harm you. Please let me be your friend." She finished and waited patiently for the animal's next move. The mare finally raised her head and gave a soft neigh, making Sephora smile. "That's it, my beautiful lady. I'm coming to touch you." And as if the horse understood her every word, she bowed her head and allowed Sephora to pat her. She didn't know how long she spent in the stable with the horse, but when she looked up to find Lord Abel watching her with curious eyes, she blushed. "I'm sorry." She stepped away from the horse, but it followed her, nuzzling her shoulder gently and causing her to giggle. "She seems to like you." "She's so beautiful." Sephora gently rubbed the horse's muzzle. "What's her name?" Abel shrugged. "Tilda thought you should name her yourself." Sephora's eyes widened. "She's for me?" "Yes. Your Aunt Tilda saw her when we visited some friends and said she was just the horse for you, and my wife is always right." "Thank you so much." She turned her face away so Abel wouldn't see that she was crying. She heard soft footfalls and then a sound of joy. "I see that you found her." Lady Tilda clapped her hands joyfully. Sephora rushed towards the Duchess and hugged her. "Thank you so much, Aunt Tilda." "Well," Tilda patted her shoulder gently, "you love horses, and it's only natural that you have one of your own. What name have you decided for her?" "I'll call her Shining Star." Sephora was really fighting to keep the tears at bay. She couldn't believe that Tilda would go all out and get her such a beautiful gift. "That's a beautiful name." Tilda moved to the security of her husband's arms. "But be careful of her. The last owner says she's got very unpredictable moods. He'd bought her for his children, but she was too wild for them to handle. I thought she would be just right for you, only you have to really watch out for her moods." "I'll be careful, I promise." Once the Duke and Duchess had left, Sephora broke down and cried for a long time, her face buried in the horse's side. Shining Star seemed to understand what her new mistress was going through, for she stood still, making soft sounds from time to time as if to comfort her. "You really are the best, Shining Star," Sephora said when her weeping bout was over. "I wish I could ride you today, but I promised Aunt Tilda that I would do something for her. But I promise to be back when I'm free." Leaving the horse took much effort, but finally Sephora pulled herself away. She knew why she was so emotional and was glad that the Duchess had been so kind to her. Actually, Lady Matilda Wickham, formerly Matilda Johnson, had been taking care of Sephora for close to 6 years. They'd both been brought up in the same orphanage, even though Matilda was only 2 years older than her. From the moment she was taken to the orphanage after losing both her parents to consumption when she was 10, Tilda became her guardian. The older girl would always look out for her, and Sephora often wondered if Tilda had continued on to be a warden at the orphanage just for her sake. It wasn't easy dealing with the other wardens and children who didn't understand her pain, so Sephora had been a rather difficult child, but Tilda would always defend her and had even risked her own life to save her. Because of her deep loneliness, which often manifested as difficult behavior, Sephora found herself manipulated by one of the wardens who promised to take her to visit her parents' graves and then buy her a dress and birthday cake. What the 16-year-old had found out, however, was that she'd been sold to some people who were planning to take her to America as a mail-order bride. Her own cunning had saved her from remaining on the slave ship as she pretended to be very ill. She'd watched as 5 girls died from overcrowding, and their bodies were mercilessly tossed into the sea late at night. When the kidnappers left a 6th girl at death's door, Sephora couldn't let her die and had pretended to be sick and was also put off the ship. While taking care of Kathleen Crummer, Tilda had found them and brought them to Nottingham, to the Kathleen's uncle's place. Little did they know that Tilda and the Duke would fall in love, get married and give them all a home. After Tilda got married, Kate followed shortly after, and though Sephora was happy for her friends, she felt rather lonely. Which was why she was so happy to have the horse. At least she could talk to Shining Star and pour out all her grief and thoughts without fear of recrimination or criticism. Sephora had no idea what direction her life was going to take, and as she pushed open the door leading to the Duchess's private sitting room, she forced a smile on her face. "You don't ever have to pretend with me, Sephora," Tilda observed the younger lady. "I know that you've been feeling very low for a while, which was why when I saw Shining Star, I thought she'd be perfect for you." And she is. But Aunt Tilda, she'd started calling her that when Kate did. Will I ever find someone like you and Kate have... "Come here, Sephora." Tilda took her hand, and they sat down on the small couch in the room. "You're a very special girl, and you should know it. Of course, God has someone for everyone, and when the time is right, you'll meet a good man who will love you so much. Do you know that I often wondered the same thing myself?" Sephora nodded. "Sorry that I read your journal back at the orphanage." "That's all in the past. For a long time, I wondered if I would remain at the orphanage taking care of children. It was a good job and I loved it, but deep within, I always wanted something more. All the events that happened to you and Kate were just leading me to a bell, and now I'm so happy. Love is a special grace bestowed on mankind by our Lord. It isn't easy to find the right partner, especially when one is desperate and unsure of what they want. But if you pray and ask the Lord to help you, he will do so. You will meet a good man soon. Actually, the Duke was suggesting that we hold a ball, so you can get to meet some fine young men." Sephora shook her head. "I don't think I want to spend time making small talk, Aunt Tilda. If the right man will come, he will come." "If that's how you feel, then it's all right. But, Sephora, you always have a home with us, but on one condition." Tilda looked at her keenly to make sure she understood what she was telling here. "I won't have you running away and causing us anxiety. If there's a problem, please let me know and we'll seek a solution together. Do you understand?" "Aunt Tilda, I promise never to run away again. After the time I got into trouble, never again will I leave home without permission." "I'm happy to hear that. Now, I wanted you to help me with this quilt that I'm making for Kate's new baby." Aunt Tilda, Sephora laughed. "Isn't it too early? We only found out a few weeks ago that she's NCT and there's a long time to go." Tilda smiled sheepishly. "I just want an excuse to go and visit Kate and see how she's doing. You know how the Duke doesn't like me going anywhere, and even if I do, I have to return quickly. Making things for Kate gives me the excuse to stay a day or two longer." Chapter 2. Dangerous Times. Lord Percival Corrington couldn't understand why his sister-in-law Isabel was asking him to accompany her on one of the many errands that she'd started running lately. "You might as well take one of the servants," he told her, frowning as he studied the latest figures of the estate's accounts. Things were really grim, and if a miracle didn't occur soon, they would be bankrupt. He was doing his best, but they didn't seem to be pulling through at all. In the past few months, he'd had to sell some of the family treasures just to keep afloat, and at this rate, he would end up selling the manor and lands left to him by his father. It hurt him to see the pieces that his parents had collected over the years being handed over to the new owners. Mercifully, it was all left to Eustace Homer, his estate manager, to take the pieces to whoever had purchased them. He just couldn't bring himself to do it. "We don't have enough servants to escort me because we have let most of them go," Isabel pleaded. "I have to go to the apothecary and get medicine for your stepmother and Richard, and I can't ride out alone." Percy finally decided to take her, otherwise she would nag him endlessly. "But we have to hurry because it looks like it might rain." "Spring is coming early this year," Isabella replied. "I'll just get my reticule and we can leave." As they rode, Percy noticed that Isabel kept looking back as if expecting someone to be following them. "Are you expecting someone to catch up with us?" "No," she laughed nervously, and he wondered what was going on with her. He sympathized with his sister-in-law, his stepbrother's wife. Isabel was having a difficult time because Richard was sickly, and then there was his mother, who was mentally unstable. "I'm making arrangements for Richard to see a specialist in London because I don't like it that his illness seems to be getting worse instead of better. The apothecary has been giving him medicine for a while, but there's been no improvement." "Richard will be fine," Isabel said quickly. "He wanted some fish. Do you think we could pass by the river so I can get him some?" "I'm sure the fishmonger has some good fish we can get." "Mr. Clement won't give us any more credit until we settle the last account." Percy frowned. "I thought we settled his accounts last week." She shook her head. "We owed him a lot, so the money you gave me only covered part of it. Your brother needs to eat fish, for that's the only thing that his stomach can handle. Please, it won't take long, and I promise not to bother you again." We didn't even bring anything to fish with. But I did, Isabel said. Isabel's strange actions should have alerted Percy that something was going on, but he was worried about his brother and wanted him well. If fish was what would make Richard happy, then he would go fishing for as long as was necessary. They didn't spend long at the apothecary's shop, and on their way back, Percy led Isabel towards the river where he, his father and Richard would often go fishing in days gone by. It was a large river, and because of melting snow, light rains, was quite full. "Stay back," he told Isabel when she wanted to alight from the carriage. "It won't take long and I'll be back soon. Just stay out of the cold and rain." Yes, Percy sought the best place to stand as he fished. It was at a rocky spot, and he cast his rod in. There was a tug, and as he reeled in the fish, heard a sound behind him. He turned to find Isabel pointing a pistol at him. "Isabel, what are you doing?" "I'm sorry, Percy, but I love my husband more," and a shot rang out. Percy felt a stinging sensation in his right shoulder and lost his footing, hitting his head on a small rock. The last thing he remembered was Isabel pushing him into the river. "Where are we going today, Shining Star?" Sephora rubbed her horse's muzzle before saddling her. "We need some flowers to paint, and since spring is here, we can find some further afield." "If someone hears you, they would think you're speaking to a creature that can answer back." Tilda came into the stables. "Where are you riding to?"
"To the south side. We've been all over, and I need to find a new subject to paint today."
"Just be careful of strangers in the weather. Don't go further than is safe, Sephora." "I'll be very careful, and besides, I've been practicing my shooting and don't go anywhere without the pistol Lord Abel gave me." "Still, please just be careful." "I promise that I will." As she rode away, Sephora could feel Tilda watching her, and she sighed. The woman worried so much about her, but she understood why, and though it sometimes irritated her, it was good to know that someone was looking out for her. She rode for a while, then spotted something like a rooftop, which was odd. Lord Abel had had all unoccupied huts and cottages on the estate torn down after his cousin kidnapped and held him in one, intending to kill him. As she rode up to it, she was very cautious because tramps often made their way to such abandoned properties. While still on horseback, she went around the cottage, which had obviously been used by woodcutters. It was still sturdy and strong, meaning that it had been in use until recently. It wasn't run down like many of the others which the Duke had told his servants to tear down. Once she was sure there was no one around, she got off Shining Star and, holding the reins lightly, drew closer to the hut. Something scurried in the undergrowth, startling her, but when she saw that it was just a small hare, she laughed. She opened the door, which was still strong, and left it open for a while, just in case there was an animal which wanted to flee. There was none. "Shining Star, watch the door and let me know if someone comes along," she told the horse as she entered the hut. What caught her attention was the fact that it had 3 rooms which all had large windows to let in enough daylight. Whoever had built this hut had done so with not only convenience in mind, but comfort as well. "Perfect," she said. "It would be the perfect place for her to work and store her many paintings. All she had to do was get someone to put a stronger lock on the door, and once the Duke gave her permission to use it, she would clean it and give it a fresh coating of paint." Lord Abel was willing to allow Sephora to use the cottage. "But you have to ask the Duchess first. She worries a lot about you, and being out there in the woods alone is something she won't like very much." Just as the Duke had said, at first Tilda wasn't willing to give permission. "I have to come with you to see it and make sure that it's safe." "It's a beautiful little hut, Aunt Tilda." "I believe you, but until I have the assurance that you'll be safe, I don't want you going out there alone." Chapter 3. A Strange Guest. The moment Sephora stepped into her hut some days later, she knew that something was different. Everything looked all right upon first glance, but her 6th sense told her all was not well. Proceeding cautiously, she peered into the first room. It was empty save for the paintings she'd already done, which were lined up against the wall to dry. When she opened the door to the second room, she gave a start. Someone was in the small cot that she'd brought from the manor so she could rest sometimes when the work was too much for her. It was a tall man, and his feet hung from the end of the bed. His eyes were closed and his breathing seemed strained. She waited for him to acknowledge her presence, but when he didn't, she took a cautious step inside. For the first time since she'd started using the hut as her studio, she was glad that Aunt Tilda had insisted on her always having 2 bodyguards with her. Milton Sykes and Roger Barnes had been appointed to guard her wherever she went, and should the stranger turn violent, she knew they were just a few feet away. Taking a deep breath, Sephora drew closer to the bed and gave a soft cry of dismay. The man was bleeding from a gash on his head, and there seemed to be blood on his shirt at his right shoulder. "Sir," she tried to shake him awake, but then realized that he wasn't asleep. He was unconscious. He seemed to have lost a lot of blood, and she wondered who he was, where he'd come from, and how he'd ended up in her cottage. Having nothing with which to clean his head wound, she tore her petticoats and went to the next room for some water. There was a soft knock at the door, and she froze for a moment. "Miss Sephora, are you all right in there?" Milton called out. Sephora shook her head slowly. These men were really trained bodyguards, and she wondered if they suspected anything. Yes, she hid the cloth and walked to the door. Opening it, she found Milton with his hand on his sword, ready to draw it in case of any trouble. She forced herself to be calm. "I'm all right, why?" "Roger noticed some footsteps that weren't there yesterday, and it hasn't rained or snowed for a few days, so they're quite fresh. We thought a tramp might have entered the cottage, and you could be in danger." "There's no one here." She hoped he wouldn't insist on checking the rooms, then gave a sigh of relief when her answer seemed to satisfy him. "We'll let you get back to work then." "Thank you." Sephora quickly cleaned the unconscious man's head, and after putting on some ointment, which she always carried in her reticule, she bandaged the wound. Next, she tried to get his shirt off so she could see what kind of wound he had, but it was next to impossible. Not only was he a tall man, but he was also quite heavy. She had decided not to inform her guards about the man's presence, but given his condition and the care he was going to need, she felt that she had to. Besides, someone would have to stay with him through the night because she couldn't very well leave him all alone in the cottage. What if someone attacked him, or he regained consciousness and tried to get away and got hurt again? But what if he was a criminal or fugitive on the run? Then she would be in grave danger, and might also put the Duke and Duchess in danger. She made a decision and hoped she wouldn't regret it. "Milton, Roger, please come in here for a bit." She stood aside and let the two men into the cottage. In the second room she pointed, and they looked at her curiously before walking to the door. They were both startled to see the man lying in the bed. "Who's this man, and what is he doing here?" "I wish I could give you an answer to that, Milton. He was just lying there when I came in this morning." "But how did he get in? Didn't you lock up yesterday when we left?" Sephora turned to Roger and nodded. "That I did, but I'm as surprised as you as to how he got in because the lock wasn't broken or anything." "I just want to know who this is." Milton walked to the bed and bent down. "Please don't harass him just yet. He seems to be unconscious and badly hurt. I've cleaned his head wound, but I noticed the blood on his shirt at the shoulder. He must have another injury. I tried to look at it, but he's too heavy for me to lift." "This isn't right, Miss Sephora. If the Duke or Duchess find out what is going on, our heads will be served to them on platters." Sephora hid a smile. Of the two guards, Milton tended to take his duties very seriously. "It won't come to that because we won't tell them anything." "But, at least for now, Milton," she said quickly, "we have to find out who this man is before letting anyone know that he's here. It means that one of you will have to stay with him during the night until he's well enough to tell us who he is." "I don't like this," Milton muttered. "Trouble is what this is." "Let it be upon my head, should the Duke find out. Just help me get his shirt off so we can see what kind of wound he has." The two men skillfully took off the unconscious man's shirt, and Milton exclaimed loudly, "He's been shot. This must be a fugitive on the run from the law." "You don't know that." Sephora knew that she had to make it clear to the guard that she was in control here. "Let's not jump ahead of ourselves when we have no idea what is going on. This man could be in a lot of trouble and hiding from someone who wants to harm him. Just help me see if we can find the ball inside the wound before it festers." "We don't have any tools to use." "Roger, run back home and ask one of the maids to give you my sewing kit and a bottle of the finest brandy. Make sure no one sees you carrying those things, especially the brandy. The sewing kit can be explained away, but not the alcohol. Also bring me some linens and a blanket or two, whoever will. Stay with him tonight. We'll also need enough food and something to cover with at night, as well as some candles." "That is a lot someone could get suspicious, miss." "That's why I said you have to find one of the servants, preferably Regina, my personal maid. She has a good head on her shoulder, and if you charge her not to tell anyone, she'll keep silent. Tell her that I sent you, and discretion of the utmost is called for. Now hurry, because we have to make this. I'm comfortable before the wound gets worse." "Yes, miss." Once Roger had left on the errand, Sephora ignored Milton's grumbling, but she understood his concern and so wasn't annoyed at him. His concerns were legitimate for just a few months before. Someone had tried to harm the Duke and nearly got away with it, but for Tilda... "There's not much we can do for him until Roger returns," Milton said. "I'll be outside just in case of anything, but I still feel that you should let the Duke know of this man's presence on the estate." "All in good time, Milton," Sephora said firmly. The guard shrugged his shoulders and went back to his watching post. Chapter 4. Return to Consciousness. "Where am I?" Lord Percy woke up and his eyes momentarily clouded with panic. "Who are you, and what do you want with me?" He struggled to sit up, but winced from the piercing pain in his shoulder. Gentle hands pressed him back to the pillow. "Sir, my name is Sephora Oswald and you happen to be in my cottage. Who are you?" Percy didn't know whether to trust the beautiful woman standing over his bed or not. Then he reasoned that had she wanted to harm him, she would have had plenty of time when he was unconscious. "My name is Percival." He deliberately omitted his title and second name. After all, Percival was a common name in this part of England. "How did I get here?" He looked around and saw the warm room. It had pretty drapes and a carpet on the floor, clearly a feminine room. Who brought me here? "That's the question that I've been asking myself too," Sephora said. "I came into this cottage just this morning to work as usual and found you lying on this cot." Percy closed his eyes and then the memories flooded back into his mind. He remembered his sister-in-law shooting him, that she pushed him into the river and he'd tried to swim away as fast as he could. He also remembered his head striking against something and then everything went black. He couldn't recall much else, except stumbling through the woods and finally collapsing. "I'm sorry to invade your space." He tried to rise again, but his shoulder felt as if someone was prodding it with a sharp object. He also felt very weak. "You were shot, and there was a ball in your shoulder. My guards helped me remove it, but you lost a lot of blood and I'm happy you're awake now. You need to eat and drink plenty so as to replenish the blood in your body." "You're so kind, Miss Sephora." "I'll send Roger in just in case you need something, but I'll be in the outer room working." Once Sephora had gone, Percy struggled to sit up, aided by the guard. "Thank you." "That's all right, sir. I hope you're not here to make trouble for Miss Sephora. The Duke and Duchess have no idea that you're here and we're keeping silent for now." Percy heard the warning tone in the man's voice. "If you try to harm Miss Sephora, we'll soon do away with you." "Have no fear. I only seek refuge for a few days until I'm strong enough to return home." "And pray tell me, where is your home?" "Erewash." "You're a good way from home." Not by choice, Percy didn't want the man finding out too much about him until he was sure he could trust these people. "In any case, if you need anything, please let me know." "Thank you." It had been 2 weeks since Sephora found Percy in her cottage, but now she knew that he wasn't just an ordinary man. There was something about him that made her think about Lord Abel, Tilda's husband. He behaved like someone who was used to people waiting on him, but at the same time, he had a certain genteelness about him that bespoke of a noble upbringing. She really wanted to know who he was, but short of asking him, she had no way of finding out, and she felt very shy in his presence. With each passing day, he was getting stronger, and he even spent time in the room she used as her studio, watching her as she painted. Though he made her slightly nervous, he was a good guest because he didn't interfere with her work. Today, she wasn't going to the cottage early because Milton and Roger were helping Percy with his ablutions, and since there weren't any facilities at the cottage, they had to use the room for that. She would go by much later and take him some hot food as she'd been doing. To kill time, she was on the lawn doodling in her sketchbook, which was something she often did. She would later transfer the pictures to canvas and make paintings out of them. Each time she went to the cottage, her heart fluttered, and she knew that she was in love with the strange guest. He was handsome and tall, but what drew her to him were his beautiful dark eyes. He seemed to carry many painful secrets, but his eyes were kind, and he looked like the kind of man who wouldn't hurt anybody. That was the reason she had still insisted on Milton and Roger maintaining their silence and not letting the Duke or Duchess know about the guest. Having him to herself for most of the day made her long to have someone of her own. Sometimes when she painted, she pretended that he was her beloved and was watching her as she worked. Her paintings were selling quite well, thanks to Lord Abel. He'd seen a few pieces and showed them to his friends, making the sales for her so nobody would take advantage of her. She couldn't believe that in just the short span of a few months, she had her own money and had even asked Lord Abel to help her open an account at the local bank so she could save her money. That money also enabled her get more supplies from the grocers instead of taking much from the manor. In that way, she was able to get Percy some new clothes and shoes, a warm coat and a hat. He kept promising to repay her when he was back on his feet, and she knew that it was all about his ego, so she went along with what he said. But in reality, it made her happy to finally have money of her own to spend on someone else. Chapter 5. The Discovery. Upon my word, the loud exclamation startled Sephora so much that she dropped her sketching book. "Do you know that man? Where have you seen him?" "Why?" Sephora answered carefully, silently blaming herself for being careless. Until now, Abel and Tilda had no idea that Percy was at the cottage. "That is Lord Percival Corrington, the Duke of Derbyshire. Percy has been missing from home for about 2 weeks now, and no one knows where he is. Do you know where he could be?" "No, sir. Sephora slowly closed her sketchbook, but Abel snatched it from her and went through it. "Why do you have about 5 sketches of Percy?" He peered at her through narrowed eyes. "If you know something, Sephora, now is the time to speak." "I don't know what you mean, Your Grace." She stood up, curtsied, and hurried away before the questions became too intense for her to answer. Her heart was pounding because she knew that Lord Abel wouldn't let the matter go until he'd found out everything from her. The best place to hide for the moment was her bedroom, and she made her way there in a hurry. Meanwhile, Abel remained holding Sephora's sketchbook in his hands. She knew something, of that he was very sure, but she wasn't going to reveal anything. There was only one thing to do. Milton and Roger entered their master's study, and he could immediately tell that they were quite nervous. "Neither one of you is in trouble, but I need to know if you've seen this man anywhere on this estate." His finger pointed at the open sketchbook laying on his desk. "You need to speak up because this man is a duke and he could be in a lot of trouble." The two men looked at each other and seemed to silently agree. Then Milton turned to Lord Abel. 2 weeks ago, when we escorted Miss Sephora to the cottage as usual, we found this man lying on the small cot that she has put there for her use. We wanted to inform you, but she begged us not to, and we're very sorry about that, sir." "No, it's not your fault, Milton. Actually, it's a good thing you kept his whereabouts secret, because I've heard that someone has tried to do him harm. Thank you for keeping my friend safe, and for letting me know." Sephora was tense all morning, waiting for the Duke to summon her, and when he didn't, she packed her stuff and rode out to the cottage. Percy was walking around the living room studying her paintings. "These are really good." He didn't want her to see how happy he was that she had arrived. For a moment he'd thought that she had abandoned him now that he was well enough to walk. The wound on his head had healed, and all that was left was a small scar. His shoulder, however, continued to give him pain, and given that it was the right one that he used, he knew it would take time to heal. Still, he was happy and grateful to be alive. From the 2 guards, he'd deduced that he was on the estate of Lord Abel Wickham, the Duke of Nottinghamshire. Though they didn't move much in the same circles, they were acquainted since they'd been at Eton together. From what he knew of the man, he was very private these days, and Percy had heard rumours that his own cousin tried to kill him. He shook his head sadly. What was it with family and nobility? The moment a person became a noble of some sort, the first people who wished him harm were often members of his own family, his own case in point. Why had Lady Isabella decided to kill him? She'd looked harmless enough, but now he wasn't sure that he'd really known her at all. Since his brother Richard was next in line for the duchy, the woman must have wanted him out of the way so she could take over as Duchess. What made Percy very sad was his stepmother. Lady Penelope had been so kind to him when his father married her. She was a very sweet and gentle woman, and when she'd gone mad after delivering Richard, his father had refused to have her committed to Bedlam. When his father died and he became the Duke, Percy also made sure that she was well taken care of. But Isabella didn't want her mother-in-law around and had been pushing for her to be taken out of the house. Even though her presence never disturbed anyone, Lady Penelope would spend days gazing into the distance, not speaking a word to anyone. The only time she showed any signs of happiness were when Percy spent time with her, which was at least 2 hours each day. He loved his stepmother and was worried that with him being away, Isabel would finally get her out of the house. Sephora noticed that her guest was very quiet, and she wondered what he was thinking. She felt really sorry for him and wished she could help in some way. "You're very quiet today," she finally remarked, picking up her brushes to clean them. "Not more than usual," Percy sighed. "I wish I could be back home." Sephora didn't have any response to his comment, so she kept silent. "Forgive me for being so gloomy today. Maybe I need some sun," he said, and walked to the door. "Don't go very far," Sephora called out, fearing that someone might see him and tell the Duke. Or worse, what if his enemies had followed him out here to harm him? "I'll be very careful, I promise," Percy nodded at the 2 guards, who he knew would be watching his every move. He needed time away from Sephora to sort his mind out. He was in love with her and wished he could tell her, but his life was still in danger. The last thing he wanted was for any kind of harm to come to Sephora, so he would have to keep his distance until all this was over. But how was he going to sort this problem out from a distance? Yet he couldn't return home because Isabel would definitely find another way of harming him. This time there might not be anyone to save him. Sephora felt unsettled and decided to return to the house and ask Lord Abel for her sketchbook. She would tell him the truth and plead for leniency because she had only been helping out someone in trouble. Now that she knew that Percy was a duke, she wondered that his men hadn't been searching for him at all. She longed to confide in someone about her fears for Percy, but knew that if she as much as opened her mouth to Tilda, the Duchess would inform her husband. No, it would be better if she approached Abel herself and told him everything. Chapter 6. Face to Face. Percy's smile died on his lips as soon as he recognized the man who entered the cottage. He'd seen Sephora leaving a few minutes ago, and because she hadn't carried her bags, knew that she was probably fetching something from the house. Returning to the house, he once again studied her artwork. She was really good, and were his father alive, would have insisted on having a few of the paintings on the walls of the manor. Percy also wished he could buy 1 or 2 pieces for Lady Penelope's rooms, but right now his coffers were nearly empty. The last thing the manor needed were new paintings when they could barely put food on the table. He stood up and bowed his head slightly in deference for his peer, who did the same. Lord Wickham. Lord Corrington. The 2 men observed each other for a short while. I'm sorry to have intruded onto your estate, Your Grace. Percy, we went to school together and can dispense of the formalities. I didn't know you were here until this morning when I found Sephora doodling on her sketchpad. I recognized the sketches to be of you, and when I asked her, she wouldn't tell me anything. It was my men who finally revealed that you were hiding out here. What's going on? I heard from someone that you've been missing for 2 weeks. That's right. Percy looked around the room and offered Abel a seat. They both sat down. 2 weeks ago, my sister-in-law, Lady Isabel, asked me to accompany her to the apothecary so she could fill a prescription for my brother and my stepmother, Lady Penelope. He twisted his lips. On our way back, she said Richard was longing for some fish. He looked up at Abel. I think it's common knowledge by now that my duchy is doing poorly, so we can't get any more credit from the sellers. When Isabel said Richard wanted fish, I told her we could get some from the fishmonger, but she reminded me that we didn't have the money and our credit was really bad. She insisted on us going fishing, and I didn't think anything of it. Many times Richard and I spent time with our father at the river fishing. Little did I know what her intentions were. What did she do? She shot me in the right shoulder. His left hand automatically went to the wounded shoulder. When I fell, she pushed me into the river. I swam under for a while, and thankfully it's a big river or she might have finished me off. At some point I struck something, and that's how I hurt my head. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in this cottage. That was quite an ordeal, and I'm sorry. Abel narrowed his eyes. Why would your brother's wife want you dead? Are you sure your brother didn't put her up to this? Richard may be many things, but I would trust him with my life. He's loyal and loving, and what I think is that Lady Isabel may be pushing him to do something that he doesn't want to. He should have at least alerted you to any kind of danger. On the other hand, Richard may not even be aware of what's going on. From the moment that Isabel married my brother, his health has really been poor. I don't remember him being sickly as a child, and it was quite a shock when I brought in a doctor who couldn't properly diagnose him. When I tried to bring in another, Isabel wouldn't let me. Something must be happening with that woman. Do they have any children? No, and I doubt that my sister-in-law is with child either. Richard has been very ill, and lately, she doesn't even allow me to sit with him. I have to force my way into their bedchamber. Isabel is ever present and watching over us like a hawk. That home has become something of a prison, and I just can't understand why. What about Lady Penelope? What does she have to say about all this? I remember her from years past. My stepmother went mad soon after delivering Richard. Papa's family and friends wanted him to have her committed, but he refused and took care of her for many years before he died. When I became the Duke, I also refused to have her removed from the house because she harms no one. She was always so kind and gentle to me, and I love her like I did my own mother. My only fear is that because I'm not at home, Isabel may have removed my mother from the house. She never liked Lady Penelope, and not once since she and Richard got married have I seen or even heard that she's visited the Dowager Duchess in her chambers. I put Mother in a separate wing with her own 2 servants, and she hardly ever leaves her rooms. I remember visiting your estate some years ago with my father. He wanted to purchase some horses, and your father was selling a fine pair. I think you were in London at the time or something. Abel shook his head. Anyway, the place seemed to be flourishing and successful, so I'm surprised that it's doing very poorly. Many people blame me for the state of the duchy right now, but I'm telling you the truth, Abel, I haven't squandered my inheritance away. From the moment I became Duke, I have watched every penny and been careful with our expenses, but things are really bad right now. In my absence, my estate manager might have to declare that the duchy is bankrupt, and I'm just glad that my father isn't here to see this. It would have killed him. Something doesn't seem right, Percy. Are you sure your sister-in-law isn't working with someone else? It's highly probably that all your woes are the work of 2 or more people, and you need to take a good look at all those who work for you. I trust most of the servants because they've been with the family for years. Only 1 or 2 servants are fairly new, and in any case we had to let quite a number of them go because the estate couldn't sustain them any longer. Percy, something is happening on your estate. Don't your tenants pay their rents? They do, which is what is surprising. From the books, we should be making a tidy profit, but that's not what is happening. If anything, I've had to sell off some of the family heirlooms just to stay above water, and the remaining won't last very long. Whatever is going on at my estate is a mystery. To me, it's as if there's a demon siphoning all the wealth out of the place. What you need to do is to have someone you can trust on the inside to find out what is going on. That's the only way you will know for sure who's behind all your woes. If any of the servants find out that I'm still alive, they might unknowingly reveal this to Isabel and whoever else is involved. What do we do? Chapter 7. In Pursuit of the Truth. I'll do it. Sephora stepped into the room, and the two men looked up quickly. Neither of them had noticed her standing outside the door listening to their conversation. I can go to Lord Percival's house as a maid and find out who is behind all this. No, Sephora. Percy stood up and walked to her. He took her hands, not caring that Abel's eyebrows were raised. It's too dangerous. What if you find out the truth and then are caught? No one will be there to protect you. I won't allow it. What other choice do you have, Your Grace? Don't you want to get to the bottom of all this? I do, but not at the expense of your health and even life. Isabel was willing to kill me. What will she do to you should she find out that you're spying for me? That woman is dangerous, and right now I'm standing between my brother and the duchy, and I know that's what she's after. My only fear is that my poor brother will also soon follow me once she achieves what she set out to do. Please be reasonable. I am being reasonable, which is why I don't want you to put your life at risk like that. If I have to lose the duchy, then so be it, but I won't have your death on my conscience too. His words pricked Sephora's heart, but she refused to dwell on the hurt. He was only concerned for her safety and nothing else. In any case, a man like Percival, a duke for that matter, would hardly be interested in someone like her, at least not in a romantic way. Abel stepped in when he saw that the two of them didn't seem to be getting anywhere. What if Sephora went in? He held up his hand when Percy would have protested. She goes into your household, but Milton and Roger go with her for her safety. If there's any kind of danger, my men will protect her and get her out of there immediately. The estate can barely afford to employ one more person. How will they take on 3? Work is scarce all over England in these turbulent times, and there are times when men are willing to work for only a place to lay their heads and a meal a day. Milton and Roger will present themselves as being very poor and willing to work for free. I doubt that anyone would mind giving them work for free. I doubt that anyone would mind giving them work. I really don't know, but it's worth a try. If we can get to the bottom of this problem, then let's do this immediately, Sephora said. She wanted to see her beloved restored, even if it would mean that she would lose him. I can be ready to leave today. Tomorrow is just as good, Abel said firmly, getting to his feet. He knew just how excitable Sephora could be once she got hold of an idea. This called for calmness if they were to achieve their intended result. The two of you talk matters over and I'll speak to my men. The two waited for him to leave the cottage before Percy turned to Sephora. You don't have to do this, he looked down at her, his eyes gentle and worried at the same time. I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you. Don't worry, Your Grace, I'll be very careful. Please watch yourself at all times. Don't trust anyone because at this point we don't know who is involved. As soon as you find out anything, please get out of that house immediately. Don't try to do anything that could cause anyone to harm you. I promise. She gazed into his eyes, and when he lowered his head, she closed them again in anticipation of his kiss. But the door opened suddenly and they sprang apart guiltily. It was Abel. Milton and Roger will be ready to leave first thing tomorrow. I suggest that Sephora arrives at your estate first, and then the men about an hour later. We don't want anyone becoming suspicious before they even set foot through the doors. Sephora was hired as soon as she presented herself at the manor in Airwash. In the 2 weeks since Percy had been missing, nearly all the servants had been relieved of their duties or left of their own volition. The state of things looked really pathetic, and Sephora sympathized with Percy. It was going to take a miracle to restore things back to normal. Lady Isabel seemed like a gentle enough person, and Sephora could see the grief she tried so hard to hide. But she was still cautious because this was the woman who had shot Percy, and it could all be an act to elicit sympathy. I'm sorry that at this point we cannot offer you much in the way of wages, she said. We're grieving the disappearance of Lord Percival. No one knows where he is, and this means that we don't have access to the estate's finances. Sephora wanted to scream for the woman to stop pretending, but she remembered the reason she was here: gain Isabel's confidence, find out what was going on, and then get out as fast as possible. My lady, all I need is a place to sleep and something to eat. Tilda had charged her to speak as little as possible. Have you worked as a maid before? Yes, my lady. Do you have any references? Sephora handed her the letter that had been written by Lord Abel. Good. Good, but why did they let you go if you're such a good worker? I was relieving one of the maids who had gone to take care of her sick mother. When Mabel returned, there was no more work for me.
It happens, Isabel nodded sympathetically.
Well, you'll cook and clean, and I don't want you speaking with any strangers. If you need anything, come and find me. There's only one other maid, and she's quite a tattletale. I wish I could get rid of her, but she's an aunt to Lord Percival, or so she claims. Somehow I doubt that her claim is true, but we were desperate, and she seemed the lesser evil. How many do I have to cook for?
Why? Isabel narrowed her eyes in suspicion. Sephora shrugged as if to say it didn't matter anyway. Just want to be sure that I don't cook too much or too little, Your Grace.
Don't call me that. It's a title reserved for the Duchess, she said bitterly. I'm sorry, my lady. Go round and you'll find Hannah, the other servant. Tell her that I sent you and she'll show you what to do. Hannah turned out to be a source of information, even though Sephora pretended not to be interested in what she was saying. My lord the Duke is no more, she said sorrowfully. This wicked woman must have gotten rid of him. She's wicked, I tell you. She waited for Sephora's comment, but none was forthcoming. A day after the Duke disappeared, she brought men here to take the Duchess away. Poor woman, she screamed for her Percy, but he wasn't here to save her. This is wickedness. She wiped her eyes, and that Eustace good-for-nothing lout, strutting around here like the house belongs to him. I'll not be surprised if those two got rid of my Percy and then poor Richard is next. Those two, watch out for them. Chapter 8. Frightening Ordeal. Sephora was cleaning the stairs when she saw Eustace emerging from his bedroom. She put her head down so he wouldn't know that she was quite interested in him. According to Hannah, he kept his bedroom locked at all times, as if there was anything of value to steal. What made her even more suspicious was the fact that Eustace had taken over the old Duke's bedroom, which ought to rightfully belong to Percy. He was a queer man who shuffled as he walked and barely acknowledged her. Short and thin, his face reminded her of a hungry animal just waiting to pounce on the first morsel it came across. He passed her on the stairs without saying a word, and she followed his descent with her eyes, quickly averting her face when he turned back. It wouldn't do to be caught before she found anything out. In the 2 days that she'd been here, she quickly ruled Isabel out as the mastermind of the plot to get rid of Percival. She may have shot him, but it was clear that she'd done so under instructions or duress. This wasn't something she shared with Hannah because the other woman was convinced Isabel was evil through and through. Milton and Roger had also been employed at the estate, and she'd passed on this information, so one of them could get it back to Percy. She also mentioned her suspicions of Lord Eustace Homer, who was the son of a baron, but Percy refused to believe that he had anything to do with it. Proof is what I need, he'd told Roger to tell her, and that morning she was waiting to find some kind of proof to show that Eustace was guilty. When she was done cleaning the stairway, she went down to the hallway and heard voices coming from the study. I don't like that new maid, Eustace was saying. Get rid of her at once. You get rid of her yourself if you want, but just know that you'll soon starve. I've done all you asked up till now, Eustace. Let me have some peace of mind and take care of my ailing husband. That girl is a good worker and cooks well, even though the pantry barely has anything in it. Besides, Richard is enjoying his meals for the first time in a long time, so on this one, I will oppose you. You have no rights at all in this house. But I do. In the absence of Percy and Lady Penelope and with Richard indisposed, I'm the rightful owner of this house. The girl stays and that's that. I will tell her to stay out of your way. Just this once, Isabel, just this once. Thank you, Eustace. It means a lot to have someone who knows what she's doing instead of always running around after a maid to correct her errors. Sephora quickly returned to the kitchen before the two could find out that she'd been eavesdropping on their conversation. Hannah was taking tea and bread, which was all she seemed to do now that Sephora had taken over her duties. What is the princess up to today? Sephora shrugged. I haven't seen her, but if she catches you eating again, you heard what she said last time. The woman is as mean as a serpent, Hannah grumbled, but cleared the table and just in time for Isabel walked into the kitchen. What's going on here? My lady, Sephora, curtsied, but Hannah merely grunted at her employer. You need to prepare dinner early today. Lord Eustace is attending a ball and wants his food early enough. They don't serve proper meals at some of those functions and Eustace likes his food. Yes, my lady. Sephora's heart was pounding hard. It was the first time that Eustace was going to be out of the house for a while, and this was the best chance for her to get into his rooms and look around. The only problem was how to gain access. He wouldn't even allow her to clean them. Isabel glared at Hannah one final time before leaving the kitchen. Sephora turned to the older woman. Don't antagonize Lady Isabel, or we may soon find ourselves without work to do. She can't fire me because I know too much about what she does, and she's afraid of me telling the whole world about her midnight visits to Eustace's room. Shh! This was news to Sephora. She'd thought that the woman was innocent, so why would she then visit Eustace in his rooms when the rest of the household was asleep? I've seen her going into the room plenty of times, especially since my Percy disappeared. She pretends to go into the Duchess's bedchamber and then slips through the adjoining door into the old Duke's suite. I followed her inside once, and I know for a fact that she enters Eustace Homer's rooms in that way. My poor Percy and Richard, she put a hand to her cheek. That woman is devious, but her day is coming. Shh! Not so loudly, Sephora was excited. If Isabel usually used the adjoining door, then there must be a key lying somewhere around. Once Eustace had left and everyone else settled down for the night, Sephora left her small bedroom next to the pantry and crept along the corridors, up the stairs, and to the Duchess's bedchamber. The door wasn't locked, and she quickly slipped in, walking to the adjoining door. Expecting to find it locked, she was surprised when the knob turned easily, and she stepped into Eustace's room. This might be a trap, and she waited to see if anyone would jump out at her. But all was silent in the large house, and she wondered how she was going to find any proof of wrongdoing in the nearly dark room. Apart from a single candle on the mantel, the rest of the room was cast in shadows. It was a really large room, and as her eyes got accustomed to the semi-darkness, she could make out where the furniture was. She needed to be fast before Eustace returned home, and tonight was the only chance she had of finding anything out. His desk revealed nothing other than the usual, and a quick glance through his closet showed that it only contained his clothes. Just when she was about to give up and leave, she heard footfalls on the staircase. They stopped outside the room, and she heard a key being inserted into the lock. Looking around wildly for a place to hide, she spotted the heavy drapes and slipped behind them just as the door opened. "Stupid servants," Eustace muttered. "They didn't give me enough candles." He stepped out as if to call for someone, changed his mind, and then entered his room and locked himself inside once again. Just have to make do with this single candle. He seemed to be a little unsteady on his feet, and Sephora thought of dashing out, but that would be too risky. What if he wasn't all that drunk and overpowered her? She leaned back against the wall, prepared to settle down for a long wait because the man in the room was walking around. At one point he came towards the drapes, and she thought she'd been discovered. But it was only to pull them slightly apart, and she was glad that they were heavy enough to conceal her slender frame. "There you are, my beauties." He slid open a hidden door in the wall behind the drapes, and Sephora wished she could see what he was talking about. He disappeared from view carrying the candle in his hand, and she furtively moved to look into the open panel and gaped. There were paintings, large vases, plaques, and other treasures. These seemed to be priceless, and she knew that she had the proof she sought. She just wished she could enter the room after Eustace, but that would put her life at risk, so she moved away, and soon after, he emerged and slid the panel back in place. "I'm rich, and that man is gone from my life." He placed the candle back on the mantel and danced a little jig, just as there was a soft knock at the adjoining door. "Come in, Isabel, for I know that it's you." Gazing at his treasures seemed to have put Eustace in a good mood. Isabel entered the room and stood at the door. "Please, Eustace," she held out her hands. "Please don't do this to me. You've already ruined my life. Please just let me be." "The sooner you give in to me, the better it will be for all of us, Isabel. I'm tired of you coming into my room each night to plead for your freedom instead of being my mistress. I promise to treat you well, for you know that I'm a rich man now. The best thing you can do is to come and be mine, and I will take care of you. Leave that useless man you call your husband for. He's soon going to die anyway, just like his brother." "Eustace, you promised." Isabel wept. "I got rid of Percy like you asked, and he's never coming back." "How sure can I be? What if he's somewhere just waiting to return and cause trouble for me?" "Don't you think that if he was still alive he would be back by now? I did what you asked. Please just don't ruin my life. I love my husband and would never be unfaithful to him." "I saw you first, and I was the one who brought you into this household. Without me, Isabella, you're nothing, and you should remember that very well. The choice is yours. You have 3 days to think about what you want to do, but I want you in my bed. I'm tired of seeing you wasting time with that useless boy, and yet you're mine." "I don't belong to you, I belong to Richard. He's the man I love, and I would rather leave this house than do anything so bad like being unfaithful to him." "Yes, you love your husband so much that you were ready to kill his brother. Now, I need to sleep, but remember that you have only 3 days. Else I will kill that idiot of a husband of yours and blame it on you." After all I need to do is whisper in the right ear that you killed Percy, and the guilty look on your face when the constable comes to question you will be enough to make them hang you. Now get out of my bedchamber, unless you want to join me here right now." Isabel scrambled out of the room, and when the adjoining door closed, Eustace chuckled. "I have her where I want her, and in 3 days she'll be mine." Chapter 9. To Catch a Thief. "Your sister-in-law is innocent of any wrongdoing. Well, apart from shooting you, of course. But that was under duress, as I found out," Sephora announced to the 2 dukes who were in Abel's study. "That's what you said a few days ago, but where's the proof?" "In a secret panel behind the large drapes in your father's bedchamber. Earlier this evening, Eustace went out for a ball, and I managed to gain access to his suite, but he came back sooner than I thought, and I hid behind the drapes." "You could have been caught." Percy was horrified at what could have happened. "But I wasn't. Anyway, as I was there, he pushed aside the drapes and slid open a secret panel and entered." She looked at Percy. "Did you know that there's a secret room in your father's suite?" "No, we were never allowed to enter into my father's suite without proper supervision, and even then I never saw him open the panel." "What was inside?" "Painting, plaques, vases, so much treasure that my eyes nearly popped out." "Can you name any specific thing that you saw?" "Eustace had a single candle and the light wasn't really good, but I think I saw something like a painting of a woman on horseback. She had a polo stick in her hand. Then there was a large violin and a clock. Those are the items I could see from my hiding place. Those belonged to my mother, and were some of the things I sold to a collector in London. Eustace was charged with delivering them, and he said that he'd done so, but the man had only paid a small sum, promising more." "It's clear that you were fooled by this man that you trusted so much. He must have spent his own money to acquire those things, but we need to find out what else he has in there. I couldn't see more." And again, Isabel came in while I was still hiding, and she was pleading with Eustace not to ruin her life. He was the one who put her up to shooting you so he could hold it over her head and blackmail her into doing anything he demanded. That betrayer, Percy couldn't believe it. Eustace had always seemed so harmless and nice, and you said he's using my father's suite. Yes, even I haven't been able to use it because I respected my father so much. Well, he's taken up residence there. What are we going to do? Abel raised up a hand. A man like Eustace isn't to be trusted, not in the least bit. Tomorrow may be too late, especially when they wake up to find that their 3 new employees have left. He'll definitely be suspicious. Percy nodded. What do you suggest we do? Ride out at once. I'll ask Milton to get a few more men just in case there's trouble, and we can go to your house and expose this wicked man. Thank you so much, Abel, for doing this for me. Well, Percy, let's get you back home and settled in. The 2-hour ride back to Airwash was made in silence, and Percy's heart was pounding. Soon his troubles would be over, and then he would be free to make his intentions towards Sephora Oswald known. They stopped a short distance from the manor because they didn't want to alert anyone to their coming. We go on foot from here, Abel said softly, quickly tethering his horse. The others did the same. Time is of the essence, and we should expect anything. We have to be very careful, for we don't know who else could be involved. Milton says there are only 2 servants who sleep in the barn, and the woman Hannah is in the house. Then there's Isabel and Richard, and finally Eustace. We don't expect much resistance, but we have to be careful nevertheless. They met no one as they entered the house, and Abel charged his men, apart from Milton and Roger, to be on the lookout. With Sephora close by, Percy led the way through his mother's old bedroom, and when Eustace woke up, was surprised to find people in his chamber. Who are you, and what do you want? He hadn't immediately seen Percy, who stepped out of the shadows. Remember me, Lord Eustace? The man seemed to turn white and opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Percy ignored him for the moment because his interest was mostly in finding and restoring his family's treasures. Sephora, where did you say the panel was? Eustace growled at her. I knew I didn't like you, and I was right. Shouldn't have let Isabel talk me out of kicking you out. Good morning, Lord Eustace. Sephora curtsied, for after all he was still a noble man, albeit a minor one. Get out of here right now, you have no right to be here, Eustace screamed. On the contrary, you're the one who has no right to be here. Percy turned back to him. This was my father's bedchamber, and even I never used it. What gave you the right to just take over this manor as if it belongs to you? We'll see about that. Percy had turned his back to peer into the open panel. Abel had found the lever that slid it back, and the 2 men ignored Eustace, but Sephora saw him reach under his pillow and pull out something. At first she didn't immediately see what it was, but when he raised it and it gleamed wickedly in the candlelight, she reacted. Percy, look out, and she jumped in front of him, pushing him out of the way as a shot rang out. She felt a searing pain in her left upper arm as the bullet tore through her flesh and she crumpled to the floor in a dead faint. At first no one reacted, but when Eustace raised the pistol again, Milton and Roger set upon him and wrestled it out of his hand. That was when Percy moved and rushed to Sephora, taking her in his arms, uncaring that she was bleeding all over his clothes. "My darling, please don't die," he begged. "Sephora, open your eyes." Percy, Abel, leaned over his shoulder. "I'm sorry." Percy turned cold eyes towards Eustace. "You'll pay for all this, Eustace. For the rest of your life you'll pay for your wickedness. Make sure he's bound and can't get away." "Yes, Your Grace." Milton was only too glad to subdue the criminal. The adjoining door opened and they heard a gasp. Isabel nearly fainted when she saw Percy and she began trembling. "I'm sorry, Percy. I didn't mean to harm you. It was Eustace who threatened me and your brother." "She's a liar!" Eustace shouted, and Abel made a sign for him to be taken out of the room. Isabel saw Sephora lying on the floor. "What has happened to Sephora? And who are all these men?" "Questions later, my lady," Abel commanded. "Get us some clean water and towels. Sephora has been shot and is losing a lot of blood." "Yes, of course." She ran out to do as bidden. Abel turned to Percy. "Still convinced that she's guilty?" Percy shook his head. "But I'm still going to have to be very careful. She shot me once. What's to stop her from doing it again?" "The perpetrator has been apprehended. Let's listen to what she has to say before judging her. Now, if you would allow me to examine Sephora." He did and pronounced it a flesh wound, by which time Isabel had returned with towels and clean water. She helped Abel clean up the wound and bind it, then led the way back to his mother's bedroom where Sephora was placed on the bed. "She'll be all right now," Abel said. He wasn't about to leave Sephora alone, not for a moment. Tilda would have his hide for allowing this to happen in the first place, when she'd been so opposed to Sephora riding out with them again. But the girl had saved Percy's life because the bullet would have hit his spine and killed him. Now talk. Percy wasn't showing any mercy yet. He needed to know the truth. Abel's other servants had rushed up when they heard the gunshot. "Here, yes, right here, and in front of all these people. I want there to be witnesses just in case something goes wrong again," he said. "I'm sorry," Isabel wrung her hands. "I didn't want to do it." "So you said." Percy shook her head. "Why didn't you tell me what was going on from the beginning? Now it has led to so much trouble and Sephora has also been hurt." "Eustace said that if I told anyone he would kill us all." Percy made a sound of disgust, but Abel touched his arm gently. "Calm down, Percy. Let Lady Isabel tell us everything." He waved the other servants away save for Milton, Roger and Hannah, who had just come in. She would corroborate part or the entire story if needed. "I was working as a servant in Eustace's parents' home. He told me that he loved me. She felt embarrassed saying it out loud, but I was young and impressionable and believed him when he said he would marry me. He needed me to help him recover all of his father's wealth, which the Duke of Derbyshire had stolen from him. He'd worked as estate manager here for a while and didn't want to continue doing so." She looked down then up again. "The plan was for me to make Lord Percival fall in love with me and marry me, then we would find a way of getting back Eustace's inheritance." "The man is a liar! My father doesn't owe his father anything," Percy spat out in disgust. "We felt sorry for him because his father was a gambler and drunkard and wasted his wealth. That was why my father agreed to give him a job. I didn't know that he would turn around and want to harm us." "I'm sorry." "Stop saying that and tell us what happened." "Yes, Your Grace," Isabel sniffed. "Lord Percival wasn't home much, and even those times that he was, he barely noticed me. So I turned my attention to Richard. He was young and fell in love with me. But then I also fell in love with him and didn't want to cause him any harm." She looked at Percy. She looked at Percy. "Your brother loves you so much, and when he heard that you were missing, he nearly went out of his mind. Why didn't you just tell my dear brother that I was missing because you tried to end my life?" Percy Abel could feel his friend's anger, but now wasn't the time to give in to it. They needed more information. "Carry on, Lady Isabel." "When I told Eustace that I loved my husband and wanted out of the deal we made, he poisoned Richard. That's why he's been so ill." "So you knew what was wrong with my brother, and yet you didn't try to stop it?" "Not at first. It was only after you disappeared that Eustace told me what he'd done. He was rid of you, or so he thought, and now my husband was next." "What did he promise you that made you do such a heinous thing, Isabel?" "You've got to understand, I thought I loved him and would have done anything for him." "What did he promise you?" "Eustace said that when he was the Duke I would be his Duchess." "And you believed such a lie? He's not of this family lineage and I still have living relatives. You were made a fool of, and I feel sorry for you because, like him, you're going to have to answer for your deeds. Where is my mother?" Eustace had her removed and taken to Bedlam. He didn't want her around and made me tell you to get rid of her. When you wanted to bring in a doctor from London to attend to your brother, Eustace probably knew that his game would be up. That was why he told me to shoot you. And you did so in cold blood. I had to, or he would have hurt Richard badly. That was why I shot you in the shoulder, so you wouldn't die. This sounds like the intrigues that go on in the Tsar of Russia's palace. Not in England, Percy said. Go back and stay with Richard as I think about what to do. Yes, Your Grace. Isabel went out of the room with her head bowed. Abel turned to his friend. Do you believe her? I'm forced to, even though she and I can never live under the same roof again. With all that has happened, I would always be cautious around her, and that will greatly affect my relationship with my brother. What are you going to do? First, find out what's in that secret room, and also get my solicitor to follow up on Eustace. I'm sure he's stashed a lot of money away now that I know he's been behind all this. If some of your men would be so good as to fetch the constable so that I can hand Eustace over to him, it would take a load off my mind. Besides, I have to watch this room and make sure nothing is tampered with. I looked at the still unconscious woman lying on the bed. Would you please take Sephora home for now? This isn't the place I want her to be until later. Chapter 10. A Befitting Ending. The pain of unrequited love was proving to be too much for Sephora, and Tilda got really worried about her. You're not eating, you're not sleeping, and you spend so much time crying. Sephora, this isn't good for you. What can I do to help? What will make it better for you? Sephora gave her friend a watery smile. I'm sorry, I'll try to be better. That's not what I mean, dear girl, and you know it. You're in love with Percy, and that much we know, but you're going to have to pull yourself together because it's obvious that he doesn't share the same feelings. I really thought he did, Sephora whispered hoarsely. Aunt Tilda, how does one get over a broken heart? You don't, at least not immediately. She held her close. You just learn to live one day at a time. Don't try to forget him because it's impossible to do so. Just let your grief wash over you and then begin to give yourself time to heal. Have you heard from him? Tilda had, but that was the last thing she was willing to share with her friend. Abel tells me that his family's wealth has been restored. Eustace had hidden a lot of money which he couldn't account for, and it was obvious that he'd been robbing the duchy for a long time. What will happen to Isabel now? I feel so sorry for her. As do I. What I know is that Richard's father had a small countryside property somewhere, and that's where they will be living for a long time. It's nothing like the manor, but I think that is better than going to prison. Was Percy able to bring his mother back to the house? Yes. And what's more, he found a doctor who was able to help his brother too. Richard may not regain his full health, but he is certainly better than he was. That man was so wicked as to have tried to destroy the family. And poor Isabel was the pawn that was used in all this. Tilda sighed. Love makes us do the craziest of things, I tell you. I pray that they will be all right. What about Percy? How is his health? Sephora, please don't torment yourself like this. Right now, let's just focus on what lies ahead, and that is your coming out ball. I don't want that, she said sadly. My heart wants Percy and no one else. But what if he's already planning his engagement and marriage to someone else? Will you continue to hold a torch for a man who's not interested in you? Sephora looked up at the sky. Spring is here, and I think I need to go to the cottage and do some paintings. Milton told me that around this time, the woods are filled with many different kinds of birds. Their colours will cheer me up. Tilda knew when to stop talking, so she just nodded. I wish you all the best. Thank you. As Sephora saddled her horse, she thought about what Tilda had said just a few minutes ago. What if Percy was about to marry someone else? She only had one thing to do, leave for Paris and bury herself in her painting. Her work was good, and that was evident from the sales she'd made. She purposed in her heart that on the same day that Percy announced his engagement, she would leave and never return. She couldn't bear to imagine him marrying someone else, and if she was away from England, she wouldn't be there to see it happen. Oh, shining star! She rested her head against the horse's neck. I'm so sad. What do I do? Shining Star gently nudged her mistress and made a soft sound, drawing a smile from her. That's exactly what Aunt Tilda would say. Then I should be a big girl and stop wasting my life. Let's go to the cottage so I can paint some of those colourful birds. The last time he'd been here wasn't under the best of circumstances, but he was back again, this time to claim his beloved, and he hoped he would come. Unknown to her, he'd kept in touch with Milton, who told him how sad she was. But he'd had his estate to put in order before he could be free to love her the way she deserved, so for 3 weeks he'd kept away from Abel's estate. Now it was time to make things right, and as he waited in the inner room, which had been his bedroom for 2 weeks, he hoped it wasn't too late for them. What if she rejected him after all his efforts? She must be so hurt at his silence. Would she listen to him? His brother was finally settled, and for the first time in their 2-year marriage, Richard had stood up against his wife. When he found out her part in the problems that his family had faced, he'd sent her away for a while as he sorted his personal feelings out. Speaking to Richard and getting him to forgive Isabel had taken Percy nearly a week, but finally he'd agreed to do it and went to bring his wife home. The condition he'd given her was that they would retire to his father's small country manor in Hampshire and never come to Derbyshire unless invited by Percy. Isabel was only too willing to follow her husband wherever he went, and Percy was glad he hadn't insisted on her going to prison, but it would take him a long while to trust her again. Horse hooves approached, and he braced himself for the meeting with Sephora. Sephora opened the cottage door and frowned. There seemed to be flowers everywhere, and she put a hand to her heart. There she hope. A sound in the second bedroom had her going to the door, and she pushed it open. My lady. Percy bowed slightly and smiled gently when she curtsied. He didn't want to waste any time explaining himself. I've been putting my estate in order, that's why I was away. The thing I wanted most was to be with you, but first I had to work things out at the estate, so I decided to conclude that and then come to you. Sephora wanted to cry as she beheld the face of her beloved. I love you so much, Sephora. I know that you're hurt because I kept silent all this time, but that was because I needed to deal with so much after Eustace's arrest and Isabel's betrayal. I understand, she said at last, longing to be in his arms. Come here then. He held out his arms and she walked into them. This is where you belong, and I promise to be the best husband to you. That's if you'll let me. Oh, Percy, she hid her face in his chest, blushing at the delight she was feeling. I love you so much too. That's all I'll ever ask of you, apart from the permission to make you my duchess, my bride. You don't need to ask me that, she said softly. I belong to you, my love. As I belong to you too, beloved.
The end. Thank you for listening. Here at PureRead, we aim to serve you, our dear readers and listeners, with good, clean Christian stories. You can be assured that any PureRead book you pick up will not only be hugely enjoyable but free of any objectionable content. We are deeply thankful to you for choosing our books. Your support means that we can continue to provide stories like the one you have just listened to. Please like and subscribe to our channel. That way you'll be the first to hear when new stories arrive for your enjoyment. To browse our range of clean and wholesome titles, go to pureread.com. God bless you and thank you again for listening.